Hello and welcome to yet another edition of the Middle Georgia Spotlight. I'm your host, Jack Ellis. Thank you so much for being with us this week, as we appreciate you being with us every week here on the Middle Georgia Spotlight. And we ask that you view us on YouTube, subscribe to us on YouTube, and like us on YouTube. In the Spotlight this week, we have a very special guest. All of our guests are special, but we have a very special guest recently returned from the continent of Africa. And of course, we are in the midst of Black History Month. And we want to continue our conversation about Black history. And when we talk about Black history, we just can't confine it to the shores of America, but we have to look at Black history internationally and especially throughout the African diaspora. So joining us is a man from that area, been in that area for quite some time, a lot of work, but he's from the U.S., has a master's degree from Indiana University in education, so he knows from which he speaks, and none other than Cheik, I should say, Sufi. Welcome to our...
Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you know, as I said, we are at the tail end of Black History Month here, and of course we can't talk about Black history unless we talk about Africa.
Impossible.
Because, and we can't just relegate it to 1 month of the year. So as an educator and someone who worked in Africa, traveled there extensively and lived there for several years, what's the missing link, in your opinion, between blacks in America, we so-called African Americans, and Africans in Africa on the continent?
I would like to thank the American propaganda system for that, because America has painted Africa as an extremely poor place. You don't want to go to Africa. They have given our home a negative stigma to the point where one time I was sharing with an elderly African American that I had spent time in Africa, and he asked me, "Do they have houses over there?" So I think it's the disconnect from the media and propaganda painting Africa as a place that you just don't want to go. If you go there, you get sick, all the children are hungry. It comes from a lack of knowledge of self and who we are as a people, and the glorious kingdoms of Africa that are not mentioned in the Western history books very often.
What has been the effect, negatively and positively, of Africa being colonized by the Europeans for so long? How has that...
Brother, you just opened a can of worms. In some instances, in my opinion, the European colonization of Africa had a worse effect on the minds of some Africans that I witnessed personally in Senegal, where I was in one African family that was well-to-do. You know, I was there teaching them English. They had brought me in as a private English teacher. The man was a multimillionaire, traveled around the world doing business in computers. When they invited me to their house, I was the English teacher, but I speak Wolof. And we were at the dinner table, and I started speaking Wolof at their dinner table. The man stopped me and said, "Oh no, brother, we don't speak Wolof in here. We don't speak African language in our house." The only thing that could produce that is a colonized mindset. So, and sometimes some of the Africans, their mindset is more European than the assimilated African American in America. I've seen that myself.
Well, you mentioned Wolof. We should explain to the people that that is one of the main languages in Senegal as well as the Gambia.
Yes, yeah.
Spoken by people that, even though the Gambia was colonized by the British and Senegal by the French, but yet they have this connectivity in common because of a language, a common language.
Yeah. And you see that in Senegal, Gambia, of course, and southern Mauritania, which borders Senegal in the north. They are all speaking Wolof, which helps unite the different tribes. Because, you know, in English, the black man in California speaking English, the black man in New York speaking English, black man in Florida speaking English. But in Senegal and West Africa, you might go 50 miles and it's a totally different language because each tribe has their own language. So they're using the Wolof in that region of Africa as a unifying language for all the different tribes that definitely speak different languages. So it's very powerful.
Is that because the ancient kingdom where they spoke Wolof was the dominant kingdom? For instance, I spent a lot of time in Uganda. I represent Uganda, and there are several tribes and several tribal languages, but the dominant language is or Buganda, because the Buganda kingdom was the largest kingdom, notwithstanding the Toro kingdom and the other kingdom, Bayamon kingdom was there, but because of, and once independence came, matter of fact, the name Uganda came from Buganda. From which was the largest kingdom, which ultimately, which invited the British in to protect him. So even though they have their tribal language, but the dominant language is Buganda. Is that similar to Wolof?
Brother, you are well studied. That's the exact same dynamic in Senegal and Gambia and Southern Mauritania. The Wolof dynasty and Wolof people are the most numerous amount of people in that area. So since it's the most common language, the other tribes, they all adapted that language as well. So it's the same dynamic.
Of course, there are great universities. You're an educator. There are great universities in Africa long before the Europeans.
First university ever is in Timbuktu. I think everybody knows that.
Yeah, but is that still, are the books, the volume of books and things still there? Were they taken to Europe and all the art, like a lot of art and other artifacts was stolen and taken, put in museums in Europe? But is that knowledge still documented there?
The knowledge in Senegal, West Africa is ancient knowledge. They have so many libraries where they have ancient books that may be over 1,000 years old that are written in Arabic. And when I was studying some African consciousness, they said that when the Europeans went to Africa and they saw the Arabic language, they thought it was scribbles. And they said, these Africans can't even read and write. What is this? They didn't know that Arabic was actually a language. They thought we couldn't read and write. They took us for ignorant savages when the universities in Africa predate the universities in Europe by who knows how many hundreds of years.
Which brings us back full circle, put us back here in this country and America, especially not in urban America where we have a lot of African Americans located, so-called African Americans located. But they are doing a lot of, and of course it's nothing new. Malcolm X spoke to this, and a lot of other people even before that, as to how we are disrespecting ourselves, disrespecting our women, killing one another, not respecting one another. If they had this knowledge of self and this linkage with Africa, do you think that would make a difference?
Impossible. He who loves himself would seek to preserve the life of himself and his people. And the lack of knowledge of self and, low self-esteem from a Eurocentric, you could almost say white supremacy-based educational system in the West has engendered the African born in the West with the sense of less self-worth, especially when the images of the divine don't look like you. You're thinking, wow, this image of the divinity doesn't look like me, so I'm already second class based off of spirituality and divinity. Nowhere else on the planet, if you go to China, the divine looks like the Chinese people. You go to India, their image of the divine looks like the Indian people. You go to Tibet, Tibetan deities look like Tibetans, but we in America, we don't have any concept of the divine in the black image when everybody knows in the Bible Jesus had hair like wool and skin the color of burnt brass. So we need to look at that as also a form of oppression based on the images of the divine that we were brought up under. It's a very subtle principle, but when God looks like you, that immediately can increase your self-worth.
Because then you can see the God in you, and
yes.
if you can't see the God in you, then you're less than, you're almost like an animal.
It's very dangerous to give a people a God that doesn't look like them. Subconsciously and consciously, immediately that separates you from the source of power, which is God. You know, imagine. I remember they asked Imam Wharfdeen Muhammad, may Allah be pleased with him, who was a son of Honorable Elijah Muhammad. They asked him about the images of Jesus in the churches in Christ, in the churches, and the broadcaster said to Wharfdeen, "Oh, it doesn't make any difference what color Jesus is. It doesn't make any difference." And Wharfdeen said, "If it doesn't make a difference, why not just paint him black as he actually was?"
Well, it does make well, I think we know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
But let me speak a little bit about the CRT as an educator. You hear a lot about. So there's a concentrated effort to prevent black people of African descent, from knowing this history, knowing not only the history that we have befallen upon us in this country, but that connectivity with Africa. Why is it, and that is what, in your opinion, what's that all about?
Who says this? Free your mind and the rest will follow. Free your mind and the rest will follow. If you look at the slave system, they would oftentimes cut off a slave's. They did not want you to read, because reading and having knowledge can free your mind. And once you free, I think the worst kind of slavery is the enslavement of the mind of the people. Some of the philosophers say they took the chains off of our hands and feet, but they left that psychological chain on the mind, which can only be broken through education and knowledge. So that's why reading and studying knowledge is a very important aspect for love of self and knowledge of self. Without that, for the lack of knowledge, people perish. So I think that was systematically done to prevent us from knowing who we were. You guys, your beginnings were in slavery. You were an ignorant savage that we brought over here to help. And they painted that in the black mind. But once you, no, wait a minute. We had the Songhai dynasty. We had ancient Kemet. We had Malik. We got all of these African empires that we actually, our people, let me slow down.
No, don't slow down.
Our people did not come from slavery. If you can paint a picture of an entire people whose beginning was in a destitute situation, that's going to put an immediate low self-esteem in that consciousness of the people. Why not tell them, as a people, you all started as kings and queens with dynasties and universities and invented medicine and mathematics, algebra, all of these things invented by our people. This could help the African in America with his self-image.
Well, Bob Marley, in his song, Redemption Song,
Yeah.
said, free yourself from mental slavery.
Yes.
Nobody else can free your mind.
Exactly.
Emancipate
Yeah.
yourself from mental
Yeah,
slavery. No one else can free your mind. So it's up to us
as a people.
teachers
Yeah.
to teach this, even if we are not, even if the state is trying to prevent it from being taught in the schools.
Yeah, education must start in the families, in the homes.
And there are great models out there. For instance, Jewish people, even though their kids go to school, but in the evening they come home, they go to the synagogue, and they're taught a different history. The Indians do the same thing. But we don't do that.
Yeah.
And it's been said many times, if you want to hide something from a Negro,
Put it in a book.
Put it in a book. And
Yeah.
that's sad that you say that, because well, you're saying that the answer is in the book.
Yeah, and they won't read. You try to force people to read. And, you know, if you don't know your past, you don't know your future. So if we could get our, who said this? Noble Drew Ali said, if I could get you to think, you would free yourselves. So we need to encourage our people to study and learn to think outside of the European box, the European concept of mentality and thought patterns.
Yeah. The myth, there's a myth. I traveled in many countries in Africa, and so have you. You lived there continuously longer than I have. But there's a myth in this country is that Africans but not open and receptive to black Americans, black people throughout other parts of the diaspora. Is that a myth?
That's a fallacy. That's a propaganda to, oh, those Africans don't love you. Those Africans don't respect. Man,
I know it's not true.
brother, They love to see us coming home. Every time I've been to Senegal, West Africa, they love to see us coming home. They want to know, how was life in America? How did you, especially if you come home as a conscious person, they love to see you coming home with consciousness. Now, one thing, I will not say anything negative about our African brothers and sisters, but they are shrewd business people. If you come over there as a tourist, for instance, in Senegal, if you come over there as a tourist, the djembe drum costs $200. But if you come over there as an African-centered person from America, the djembe drum is only $20. It's a totally different dynamic when they deal with you from a perspective of someone who is culturally aware and who appreciates Africa, versus one who just went to Africa to get some art and some drums. So the African is very intelligent.
Let's talk a little bit about Senegal and the tourists, because Senegal is one of the places where more Africans were sold into slavery and shipped from that island called Gorée Island.
Yes,
talk a little bit about that.
I've been to Gorée Island several times, and one of the things that amazed me, it may be something very small, but I took note of it. On Gorée Island, they have the slave dungeons. And in the slave dungeons, the windows in the slave dungeon are very narrow. Like the same window in the American prison system, with that narrow window that the prisoners can look out of, is the same window in the slave dungeons on Gorée Island. Now, maybe I'm just reaching too far, but it seems as if that system of enslavement of the African minds on Gorée Island is related to the enslavement of African Americans in the penal system here in America. Gorée Island was a place where, for those who don't know, the Africans had to be taken to be seasoned. You couldn't just take an African out of his village and bring him straight to America. They would take the slaves from West Africa and that area to Gorée Island and break them, and then bring them to America as broken individuals that could be enslaved. So yeah, Gorée Island, I've been there several times. It's a place to visit. One of the times we went to Gorée Island, we had taken some people from Indianapolis, Indiana, where I was born. We had a group of about 7 or 8 of us. We went to Senegal together, visited Gorée Island. They have a tour guide that takes you around the slave dungeons in the island. And that day we were touring with a group of people from Europe and France. At the end of the tour, to our surprise, the tour guide said, the white people who did this to us were not human beings. And you should have seen the look on the people from Europe's face when he said that in front of them. The white people who did this to us were not human beings. This is what the African has said on Gorée Island.
Wow, I've been to Gorée Island.
Yeah, yes, sir.
And some of the other, the door no returns there,
Yes.
as well as in Ghana. But we've come full circle now.
Yes.
Africa was colonized. Then, of course, they gained independence. Now, with what's happened in Ukraine and what's happening with China and other places, there's the drumbeat, if you will, is again for Europeans and others, for Africa to choose sides. And right now we notice that most African countries have chosen to be neutral in this war.
Yeah.
Your president, Saul, and Senegal, who was the most recent chair of the African Union when this started. So we have to be neutral. We should be neutral. South Africa has taken a neutral position. Uganda has taken a neutral position. And how is that going to, how will America and Europe try to punish Africa, if you will, or try to force them to choose sides in this thing?
Yeah, I would have to side with the Honorable Marcus Garvey when he says Africa for the Africans. African presidents are not as asleep as they used to be when, they were mostly puppets of the colonized nation. Now the Africans are waking up and seeing that we can stand on our own 2 feet, we can be independent, and we don't have to be coerced by the European influences trying to make us pick sides. It would be great to see a unified Africa that would stand on principles based off of African concerns and African needs to develop the African culture. I remember one of the African presidents named Thomas Sankara, he was saying that if we Africans continue to pay off the debt owed to Europeans, we will die. But if we don't pay them, they will live. So we should not be responsible for paying off any political debt to the countries that colonized us. He was shortly assassinated after speeches like that. So I'm one who says Africa for the Africans, and we don't have to meddle in the affairs of European politics.
But China is not the wild card, if you will, but China has come to Africa, as I noticed in my travels, especially in East Africa and even in West Africa, more especially in East Africa, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Kenya, built a high-speed rail and from Addis Ababa up to Djibouti, built a nice expressway in Uganda, built the great earthen dam on the Blue Nile up in Ethiopia. So China is doing just the opposite of what the Europeans doing. Now, granted that China wants and needs natural resources, but the Europeans took natural resources and people without developing the country, but at least China is helping develop the country. Is that your observation in West Africa?
Even in Senegal, you have plants for production being built in Senegal by the Chinese government. So Senegal has made some type of allegiance with China, because in Senegal you see factories and plants that have some Chinese writing on the outside of the building. I'm riding through Senegal, going to different villages, and big plant in the middle of nowhere, Chinese writing, helping the Africans develop their infrastructure. So if it's a symbiotic relationship where both parties benefit, that's a blessing. But if it's just a European nation coming and saying we're going to take the resources from here back to Europe, that doesn't seem like a system based off of justice.
And that's what's has happened with this new technology, batteries and lithium. You know, you can't build a battery without the Congo, and 60% of all the stuff that goes into these batteries for these new cars are coming from there. So let's just hope that the value addition will be there. But let's talk about some of your work in Senegal. Now, you understand you're going to be going back to will be established in a school to teach what?
Yes, our teaching is based off of Sufi Islam. It's an esoteric Islam that you find in West Africa. My stance is Islam is an African way of life. It's not based off of what you see in the media with the Arab culture. One thing that we in the West don't know is that Islam and Arab culture are two different things. I'm a firm believer that the way of Islam is the exact same way that we had in ancient Kemet and ancient Egypt. It was called Ma'at. Ma'at is the balance of God, man, and nature in a harmonious system. And Islam is a system based off of God, man, and nature living in a harmonious system. So we want to give our people back an African Islam based off of the teachings of Cheik Bamba from Senegal, West Africa. My intention was to go to Senegal again after Ramadan, but praise Allah, the Khalifa in the holiest city, one of his sons has reached out to us to come back almost immediately to receive the Khalifa's blessing in Touba to begin to build a home for people from America to come and a school for people to come live and study. So this is our project to bridge the gap between the African Islamic educational system of Senegal and the people in America who are gravitating towards the way of life called Islam.
Now, Touba, you mentioned Touba. Touba is, I guess, not on the same scale, but is it a holy place similar to Mecca? Well, Mecca is Mecca.
Mecca is Mecca, yes. But I will be the first to say, and I don't care what the Muslims say, there are Africans in West Africa who make a pilgrimage to the holy city of Touba once a year to celebrate Cheik Bamba, who was a holy man and a saint from that country. So Touba is definitely a holy place that's protected by angels, protected by the Quran, protected by the saints who live there. Yes, Tuba is a holy city. I've been there several times. Tuba's so holy, I hate to say it on camera, I've ate dirt in Tuba. I shouldn't say that. People are like, oh, this guy, he done drank the tea. But I have ate dirt in Tuba. The place is so holy.
Well, speaking of Islam, America early on saw Islam as this, obviously a foreign religion to be afraid of, tried to paint President Obama as being a Muslim and he shouldn't be trusted.
Yeah.
But now it seems like those things are being taken away, especially after some education and men going to Iraq and women serving there. That has kind of come down. Do you see that in the future that probably America will dispel a lot of those myths?
Yeah, because I think Islam is the answer to 95% of the ailments and sicknesses of the people in America can be solved by practicing a way of life called Islam. The sad part is, just as Africa has been painted, I remember growing up, I thought all Muslims were terrorists just from TV. But do you know that according to Quranic principles, a Muslim cannot be the aggressor. So any acts of what they call terrorism, any acts of aggression, I don't care if your name is Muhammad, you're outside of Islam. Imagine a Muslim cannot be a terrorist. This is totally contradictory. So the African Islam is centered in peace, love, harmony, and unity and justice, whereas some Arabic forms are just political stances that have nothing to do with the Holy Quran and Prophet Muhammad.
So you would say to young people in America, not that you are recruiting young men and women to become Muslims, but you would say don't dismiss it out of hand if you are looking to inculcate yourself with
I
God.
remember when the Dalai Lama was asked about bringing people to Buddhism, and the Dalai Lama, I love his answer. He said, well, if Christianity is working for you, keep it. He said, if Islam is working for you, keep it. But if it's not working, try Buddhism. I said, if Christianity is working for you, keep it. Allah in the Holy Quran says the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims will all have a chance to go to heaven. People don't know that the Quran is the only book that accepts the other traditions that came before Muhammad. A true Muslim is one who loves Jesus, one who loves the Bible, one who loves Mary, the mother of Jesus, but we didn't get this teaching in the West. So if we could remove the stereotypes of Western concepts of Islam, we could see that it's an option for people whose form of Christianity may not be working for them.
Well, look, you have shared a lot of good information with us. I think who understood that concept was Thomas Jefferson, one of the so-called founding fathers, when he took the oath of office using the Holy Quran. A lot of people don't want to talk about that.
And they say Thomas Jefferson was reading Arabic as well. He had a Quran with Arabic and English. A lot of people don't want to mention that.
He knew the knowledge but didn't want to share it with the broader country. That's very, very, very unfortunate. But anyway, thank you very much, and good luck with good luck. Many blessings on your future travels back to the motherland, and may your work continue to be blessed by Allah.
Man, thank you for the opportunity. This is truly a blessing.
We want to thank you all so much for joining us. For Cheik, Sufi Ba, I'm Jack Ellis. Until next week, right here on the Middle Georgia Spotlight. Take care, everybody.